following is an interview with Roy M. Johnson, Johnson, of Ardmore. The first portion of the tape was destroyed by age. The tape was made in 1956. We will pick up in the middle and hope that it will continue all right.
And was to remain so for some time. I had passed the well that was drilling in the south, on the south side of what is now the Ragtown field, and become acquainted with the drillers. And Critchlow from Pennsylvania is my. Some other parties had an interest in the leases there. Father and I had some scattered leases in all directions from the well, but nothing in very close proximity to it. When the well was hit, or the sand, at something about 640 or 50 feet down, they had orders, evidently, to shut the well down and report to Critchlow, and then he'd come out and see it drill in. But we had met the drillers on the streets of Ardmore and asked them about the well. And when I found out that they thought they were on top of the sand, I immediately took my automobile, an EM&F, and went out there to the location to see if we had the thing straight in the mine. The drillers thought that the well might blow itself in at any time, and didn't know but what at any time the well might get to cutting up and drill itself in. And so I went out there. And after I got out there and canvassed the situation, made up my mind that some direction from the field, some direction from the well, there was a big oil field. And what direction that was anybody's guess. It might be to the south, and we happen to have some leases out that way. It might be to the west. It might be to the north. It might be to the east. No one knew. And at that time, nobody believed much in geology. And it was common among the wildcatters and fellows who were in the oil game to say, oil, after all, is just where you find it. And that was the belief at that particular time. The a great influx of people came as a surprise. They heard of this in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and everybody that was connected with oil flocked in there to the Ragtown field. And the people brought their tents and families, and the country was just full of people almost, it seemed like, overnight. The weather was good. There was not any water at that time in the bayou. It was dry. And Whiskey Creek, that later on was to be right in the very center of things, was dry. We didn't know at that time what the extent of the Ragtown field would be, but it later proved out that the Ragtown field ran in a direction from the northwest to the southeast and was about 10 miles long by about 2 miles wide. That in one spot of the Ragtown field, it was a very hot spot. This is a phrase that's used in the oil field to describe good and better production. I was more interested in getting into a hot spot, what all men call a hot spot of a field, than any other thing. Although all of the field was good, but there was one spot that was particularly good, particularly hot. And that was on Whiskey Creek in the west part of Section 5 and all of Section 4. We only had 10 acres in the middle of Section 4, and while we had a standard hole drilling outfit, tools, we could put to work immediately, and our man Holsterhout, who had been in all the fields from Pennsylvania clear on to Oklahoma, and was a good standard hole driller, was firmly of the opinion, and correctly so, that the first ones to get drilled, their well drilled in, would have the best producing wells. Therefore, we had only 10 acres, and it was Holsterhout's contention that 10 acres, if he developed it right, was as good as 160 if slowly developed, and we proceeded on that theory. And we bent every effort to getting down the 4 wells that we were entitled to, because all of Indian Territory had been years ago surveyed and the markers put. So we had no trouble with claims or the boundaries or anything like that. But there were 4 wells. We were entitled to 4 wells on each 10 acres of lease. We proceeded then, and now Holsterhout got all this pipe, and how we got it all, I don't know, but we did, and got it in there first before the neighbors on all sides of us realized it, and drilled in one after another these 4 wells, beginning to strike the sands at 640 feet, and perhaps getting 30 feet of sand, shale break, and then more sand production, and then a shale break. And as far as we went down, which was less than 2,000 feet, we had oil sand, and in a volume of in an amount equal to a spread of 600 feet. Very prolific. And the wells, after they were drilled in and opened up, we just let them flow and fill all the tanks on the 10 acres earthen tanks we had built, little overflowing, and the oil from the 4 wells filled those tanks and ran off and dissipated in the ground and down in the bayou. And the bayou at that time was dry because the rains hadn't set in, the fall rains, to fill the stream up with water. And we were flowing a 2-inch stream from all 4 wells with the gas, and just letting the gas go into the air, or putting up torches to burn the gas. And this gas waste was, as a matter of fact, just excessive. But the idea was, in those days, and talking with the oil men, you heard on every hand the assertion, get rid of the gas to let the oil come into the well. And every company drilled their wells, and there were hundreds of them drilled to the sand, and all the companies had the same proposition that we had in getting rid of the oil. And there were no pipelines into the field as yet. And since everything was full, the oil overflowed and filled the bayou. And the bayou, which ordinarily is a dry stream, became full of oil, and some way or other it caught fire and was burning for 20 or 30 miles downstream. The bayou on stream on fire for 20 or 30 miles would cause a lot of damage. And the wells, from hundreds of wells from all over the field, flowed into the bayou and made the farmers downstream particularly sore, and they brought suit, all of which is a matter of court records.
Mr. Ramsey, you told us about how the people lived in the tents in the beginning because of the fair weather. But what happened when the rains came and the bad weather?
The people had anticipated the weather change, and had decided to get into more permanent quarters. And Ragtown was the outgrowth of that. And the people that lived in tents moved in and built up Ragtown. And Ragtown extended on both sides of the road for half a mile, and it was a rather unique town. And it was a town from which Ragtown Field got its name. Osterhout had instructed us before he moved to Ragtown to always keep open those 4 wells on the Glenwood lease and let them flow, and let them flow onto the land and into the creek rather than ever shut them off, because, as he said, and correctly so, that whenever we cut the production down or stop the flow of the wells, we never would get them flowing again. So we left those 4 wells wide open with their flow. And the other operators in the field that had drilled wells did likewise. And that's the reason that the biofield got full of oil. Ragtown was builded because of the bad weather prospects and extended from Whiskey Creek on west, both sides of the road, for half a mile, and was all one-story structures except one. Osterhout had informed me that he was quitting the lease and had the money to build a palatial establishment, and he built it up just out up on the hill in about the center of Ragtown. And the bottom part of this building was a restaurant and fine chandeliers, and the back part of it was a gambling joint with everything imaginable for that business. And the upstairs was given over to Nell and her crowd.
How much was the price of oil at this time, Mr. Ramsey?
Oil in the Healing field started off with a price of about $1 a barrel. But as the production got bigger and bigger, the market broke, and oil went down to a price of 10 cents a barrel. And even at 10 cents a barrel, us little independent fellows couldn't sell it at all, even for 10 cents a barrel. And the workmen, too, had to be laid off, and things got squally out in the field, and there were lots of holdups and lots of killings, and it got so bad that we couldn't go from the lease into Ragtown without going in 10 fellows or more in a crowd, and then take a path and go up the path. And time we spent some time in Ragtown and then went back to the lease. One night we was accosted by a hold-up man who came out and held up Dutch Schreiber who was leader of our string of men, and he expected to frisk us all of our cash and money. But Dutch Schreiber just pushed his gun aside and said, "Look out, boy, you'll hurt somebody with that thing." And the fellow almost fainted and vanished into the night.
You have said that they used standard tools for drilling the wells, but when did the rotary rig come into use?
They used standard tools from the very first. Standard tools are the up and down tools, and use an 84-foot derrick, wooden derrick, and have an opportunity to drill first for water. And the first rotary that was brought, big rotary that was brought into Oklahoma, was brought in by our company and placed in section 11. And rotary derrick is 110 feet tall. There. How it came to put a rotary derrick in section 11 was because Arrington at Medill had a little rotary machine and drilled in the Medill field with a little rotary machine. And I went down to Houston, Texas, and brought back a big rotary, and with Kelly Powell and all the men to drill and put the well in section 11. And this was the first big rotary in Oklahoma at that time.
How did the standard tool drillers feel about bringing the rotary rig into the oil field?
Standard hole men were very hostile to bringing in a new system of drilling wells, this rotary system, because Healan had all been drilled up with standard hole tools, which are 84 feet high.
What was the result between the fighting of the standard tool drillers and the rotary system?
In answer to the question, which one of the systems predominated or won out, the standard system or the rotary system? Everything nowadays has turned to rotary drilling. And to get into a discussion about the merits or demerits of one system as against the other is rather troublesome. But the rotary system constructs a mud wall which acts as a casing pipe and proceeds down with a circular drive or round and round drive. The standard hole is the up and down tools, which drill by concussion and put in first a 12-inch string of pipe, then a 10-inch string of pipe, then an 8-inch string of pipe, and each string going a little bit further. And after the 8-inch string of pipe is put in, you are reduced to a 6 5/8-inch string. And you can't operate with any success on deeper and put in any smaller string of pipe, because there is no. You've just run out of hole, which is a term used by the standard or up and down drilling system.
Ragtown's not on the map now. Whatever became
Ragtown was built up on both sides of the road, 1/2 a mile in each direction, and with one exception was all joined up one-story buildings with one two-story building. And Ragtown caught fire and burned up. It was dry weather, and not a board in Ragtown was left to tell the tale.
This interview was by Jim Bruce, a senior at Ardmore High School.
On Oil Spring Prairie, west of what is now Oil City, and rigged up the machine and started the well. We had to have some pipe, and we had to order it from St. Louis, Missouri, the closest we get it at that time. When the kite came, we went ahead with the well, and after getting to about 600 feet, we needed another string of 10-inch pipe and an underrunner. That was the year of the World's Fair at St. Louis, and I went to St. Louis at that time and got the pipe and shipped the underrunner and pipe here. And after I visited around the prairie, I went back to Pittsburgh for a few days and then returned here. And while I was gone, Mr. Hyde and Jack Davidson, who were here at that time, attempted to put the pipe in oil and run the underrunner, and got the underrunner stuck in the pipe. And when I got back here, everything was in a bad shape, and I couldn't do anything with it. And the Ardmore and Boston Company at that time had run out of money and had about decided to quit. They still owe me 2 months' wages. Shortly after quitting the Ardmore and Boston Company, the Santa Fe Railroad Company came into the old Wheeler location and bought a Columbia drilling machine from the National Supply Company. And I went to work for them on the first well. I drilled wells deep as we could with that machine, and finally had to quit, just too small to handle the pipe and stuff that we had to use. In the meantime, the Santa Fe sent a rig builder and a rig, timbers for a rig rather, and the irons out to Wheeler, and Bulldog Smith, we always called him Bulldog, he was a rig builder, and he came out there and I helped him to build the rig, the first standard rig in the field. And we started to work on that rig just as soon as it was completed. Myself and Jim Murray as drillers, and Charlie Coolidge and Lon Bennett were the tool dressers. Jim Murray came from Pennsylvania originally, and Charlie Coolidge came from north of Topeka, Kansas, and Lon Bennett came from north of Topeka, Kansas, and Lon Bennett came from down in Texas. After we had drilled that first well in, then the Santa Fe shut down for a short time, and I went to Florida and drilled 2 wells for the government, one on Egmont Key and one on Millet Key for water. Now that's about all there is to that well, drilling that first well for Santa Fe. Mr. Critchlow, who drilled the first well in Ragtown, that is the first producing well, came to Ardmore in 1911. I got a little too close, and got some leases near Marietta, northeast of Marietta, owned by Doug Wilson. We moved the rig from Ardmore City Lake, which was owned by the Dixie Drilling Company, to Marietta to drill the first well, about 4 miles northeast of Marietta. That was drilled by the Dixie Drilling Company. Then we moved that rig southwest from Marietta onto the Bill Washington farm and drilled a well there. And while they were working on that well, we moved the rig from Berlin to Marsden on the Bud Wallace farm. And I was working on that well when Mr. Critchlow decided to drill the first well at Hilden, which is called Ragtown or Hilden, either one. And he came down there and talked to me about drilling that well out there and gave me his locations. And through the information I got from Mr. Goodrich, who was geologist for the Santa Fe while I was working for them, I sort of advised him that I wouldn't drill on the locations that he had picked. But he gave Mr. Nichols of the Dixie Drilling Company the contract to drill the first well, and instructed him to go out there and drill and make the location wherever he thought best on the bunch of leases that he had. Mr. Nichols went out there and found a good big pond of water on Mr. Wirt Franklin's land in Section 8, and located alongside of that pond of water so he'd be sure to get water easy. That well came in March of 1913. And made a small well, just 20 bars, I guess, about the limit. Afterwards, Mr. Critchlow drilled both of the locations that he had suggested to me at Marsden, and both were dry holes.
Where did you live while you drilled the wells?
Well, while we was working on these wells, we boarded at the closest place we could get to the rig. Sometimes we had to walk a couple of miles, sometimes we get in pretty close. While we drilled a well at Berwyn, we boarded in Berwyn. And while we drilled the first well at Marietta, there was a farmer that was on the place boarded us there. We had to build a camp house of our own, that is for sleeping quarters, but we ate at the farmhouse. And when we went to the Washington Ranch, southwest of Marietta, we boarded with the man on the farm there. And when we come to the Morrison, on the Bud Wallace place, Mr. Wallace, who had a full-blood, or almost full-blood Indian wife, took us in to eat there, and we got along fine. But while we was doing this work for Mr. Critchlow, who was a preacher, we didn't work any on Sundays, and I had a room rented in Ardmore by the month. Sometimes I would come in Saturday night to stay over Sunday and find somebody else in my room. Then I'd have to go out and rent me a room someplace else. Made it a little inconvenient, but we got along all right.
We have heard the story of the oil history as told by Mr. Stutzel. Now let's see what the story of a cook was. Miss Stutzel was born at St. Joe, Texas in 1880. She came to Oil Spring Prairie because she owned a part of the lease which was to be drilled into the first well. She is going to tell you her impressions of the oil fields as she saw them as the first well's cook.
I cooked for the Ardmore and Boston Oil Company drillers that drilled the first well in Carter Oil County. The well did not prove to be an oil well, but it is a gasser and furnishes gas today to run the farmhouse on the lease owned by my daughter, Mary and Bill Blanton, now retired from the Carter Oil Company, living in Sulphur, Oklahoma. We had tents to live in at that time, a double tent with a breezeway between. Cooked in one side and lived in the other. I lived in a tent, the third tent. Houses were not to be found, so you had to live in tents. And when we came to Ardmore, it took us all day to come because of the roads that we had. The drillers were Easterners from Boston and Pennsylvania. And in later years, I married the Pennsylvania driller, who was Bob Stutzel. He was a Yankee, and I was a Democrat. That's it.
Well, Miss Stutzel, where did you get the water that you used for cooking?
We got it from a bank of spring, and the spring at times would bubble up a gas, and then a little bubble of oil would come out from it.
Well, didn't that pollute the water?
Well, we had to use it. That's all we had.
That was all that was there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you said that you cooked, but where did you get the supplies if the towns were far away?
When we come to town, we carried out enough to last us. Got it from Ardmore.
And took out a large supply at a time?
Yes.
This concludes the interview with Mr. and Ms. Bob Stutzel. This interview was made by Jim Bruce, a senior at Ardmore High School.